Namaskar दोस्तों, welcome to channel Toxicology on board. Today this video will be discussing in continuation of precautionary principles only. Part 2 we will be discussing. So in this part 2 we will be discussing from the textbook Toxicology Risk Assessment of Chemicals, a practical guide, page number, it is given in page number 1, page number 44 as well as page number 45. Okay, so we'll directly dive into the concept. What is a precautionary principle? A generally accepted definition of this precautionary principle has never been brought before. So if you look into any particular definitions, no, either FDA or WHO, these people give definition. But for this concept, there is no official definition. Definition is still not given by the regulatory body. The precautionary principle is a moral and political principle. So as I told you, it will be socio-economic reasons that you need to be considered. That's why it is a moral and political principle which states that if an action and policy there is certain chemical is there or there is certain mining activity, for example, is there, so that is the action, or you are implementing certain policy or banning on certain chemicals or use of plastic. If in certain country it is been banned, that policy might cause severe or irreversible harm to the public in the absence of scientific consensus, even though there is no scientific proof that this particular chemical or this particular activity is going to cause harm to the no, to the human population or to the environment, still that action need to be taken. Okay, that harm would not ensue. The burden of proof falls on those who would advocate the taking the action. So those people who are saying that this particular chemical is safe, that is the burden of proof on those chemicals. They have to prove the safety of that particular activity. For example, if they are doing mining or for example they are using certain chemical, banned chemical, then that is the burden of proof falls on those set of group of people. They have to prove the safety of the chemical. This is the concept, this is the definition. Okay, the precautionary principle is most often applied in the context of the impact of human actions on the environment, for example in the case of mining activity. Okay, and human health, as both involve complex system, whether it is human or the environment or ecological system or ecosystem, where the consequences of action may be unpredictable. It's very difficult to understand what I am trying to say, but see, understand. For example, you are doing some mining activity. So with that mining activity, nearby plant population or the soil, if it is getting eroded, or the people who are doing that mining activity, if they are getting exposed and it is causing that particular activity is going to cause some adverse effect, some occupational hazard to the workers. So that is the activity we are talking about. Okay. So the formal concept evolved out of the German socio-legal tradition in the 1930s. The first, this concept, the precautionary principle, came in existence in 1930, centering on the concept of the good household management. The previous part one video we have seen of flame retardants. So from that, this triggered this concept called precautionary principle. In German, the concept is vorsorgeprinzip. This is what from this, and the translation to English it is called precautionary principle. Nobody will ask you on this type of this translation all these questions. Concept, some statements they will give in exam if it comes in exam, this one. And at international level, the precautionary principle was first recognized in the World Charter for Nature adopted by the UN General Assembly in 1982. It was subsequently incorporated into the various international conventions on the protection of the environment. So a lot of questions in the exam you will get with respect to environment also. Biohazards, bioweapons or terror weapons in 2023 also with respect to environment, bioweapons and bioterrorism they have asked one question. Okay, so like that you will get in exam these questions. For example, in the picture you can see this particular person. There are two set of people. One on the one side you can see scientific people who are requesting these set of people, workers, to stop this particular activity, because these set of people are saying whatever the activity which you are doing, mining, this is going to impact, it is going to have adverse effect on the human as well as the environment. So always precautionary principle, when in doubt, don't risk it. This is what you have to remember. As you can see in the case of risk assessment, weight of evidence approach will be there. Similarly, precautionary principles on the longer term or broader term, it is there with respect to whatever the effect of a chemical or the or a or an activity on the environment. Okay, we'll see some more examples also and in continuation with the textbook only. So in 2000, the European Commission issued a communication on the precautionary principle, okay, in which it adopted a procedure for the application of this concept. How? Now this concept is there. How we can apply this concept to a wider domain? In how we can use it for this characterization? The precautionary principle is not defined in the treaty, which prescribes it only once to protect the environment. What it is saying that it is not just restricted to the environment, but it has a wider application. But in practice, its scope is much wider beyond the environment policy, specifically where preliminary objective scientific evaluation indicates that there are reasonable grounds for concern. Use of certain chemical if it is having potential concern. So like the use of performing certain activity have a certain concern that the potentially dangerous effects on the environment, human, animal or plant health may be inconsistent with the high level of protection chosen for the particular community. The precautionary principle is implemented, for example, in the European food law. For example, in the case of food, the plastic covers you are using for the packaging of the food materials, or there are certain excipients or flavor enhancing agents which you are using in the food, or you're using certain use of certain preservatives or pesticides. So this extension of this precautionary principle concept is also there towards the European food law, and also affects among other policies relating to consumer protection, trade and research and technological development. Okay, so basic thing that you have to remember, there are two different set of people are there, group of people are there. So when an activity raises a threat of harm to human health or environment, precautionary principles should be taken even if some cause and effect relations are not fully established scientifically. The experiment is still going on. We don't have the final results. Still, if we see that there is a potential for concern, you have to immediately act. Prevention is better. So prove that it is not safe. That is traditional approach. What they are doing, wait for full scientific proof of harm. Whereas in the case of precautionary principle, we are not waiting for the final result. Take action in the face of uncertainty. That's what risk assessment, uncertainty is important. How to address that uncertainty is important. Take time, action comes, take after damage may have occurred. We are not, in the case of precautionary principle, we are not waiting for the damage to happen. Prevent potential harm before it happens. There is a concern, there is an uncertainty. Don't wait for certain disaster to happen. Prevent it before only disaster happens. This is the old approach is on the red side, risk of serious or irreversible harm, whereas in the case of precautionary principle, promote protection of the health and environment. Higher cost to the society, health and environment encourages responsible innovation and safer alternatives. So this is very, very important. So burden of proof lies on the public to show it is harmful. And whereas in the case of precautionary principle, on the proponent to show it is safe. So when in doubt, act to protect the people and the environment. Don't wait for the disaster to happen. That is the take-home message that we have to remember with respect to application of this principle, precautionary principle. So while a comprehensive definition of precautionary principle was never formally adopted by the European Union, a working definition and implementation strategy for the European Union context has been proposed so and so scientist. Where so this definition is very complex. Still, I will try to read it. You can pause and again read it to understand. See, while following an assessment of available scientific information, for example, here in this slide you will see there is a mining activity. We'll take case study and we'll try to understand. We started collecting the data. If we perform mining in this particular ocean, this particular area by using this particular equipment, so after collecting whatever the scientific information, there are reasonable grounds for concern. So if I am doing activity in this much kilometers of area, these either cones or the shells or the plankton or phytoplankton or zooplankton, they will be getting affected, or small fish, they will be affected. So there is a reasonable ground for concern for the possibility of the adverse effects, but scientific uncertainty persists. But why we are doing mining? If you are doing mining, we are able to get some certain type of oil or certain type of elements. Okay, so there is a benefit, but what that benefit is costing to us is the health, the environmental health, the small planktons or small fishes. Okay, priority will be given to human health and the environment, necessary to ensure chosen high level of protection in the community. So whatever the ecosystem is there, no, it should not get damaged, and proportionate to the level of protection may be adopted pending further scientific information for a more comprehensive risk assessment without having to wait. You do the activity, find the results, then you take the action. It is not. If you have a potential concern, take the action immediately until the reality and the seriousness of those adverse effects become fully apparent. So very difficult, as I told you, to understand the definition. With the example, I try to tell. Basic thing is that take the action, if there is a potential concern. That is what I can understand. And whenever I read to understand precautionary principle, I read it in terms of weight of evidence. Okay. Identify uncertainty, acknowledge gaps in the knowledge and potential risk to deep sea ecosystem. Okay. Apply precaution. Use the precautionary principle to guide the decision, assess and degree. Okay. Decide. Evaluate risk. If I'm doing mining, so what are the ecosystem are going to, how much are there any life threatening endangered species are there because of my activity, or entire that particular species, if they get endangered, then that also I need to take into action when I'm taking my decision. Evaluate risk, consider alternatives, decide on responsible action. Okay. And engage and review, involve stakeholders. So who are the, are there, if the fishermen are there in that area, or the people who are living nearby, you have to take them. Involve stakeholders, monitor outcomes and adapt as needed. Protect the ocean, choose and path the preserve and ocean health and biodiversity. So these are, pause the video again, you read the 5 steps. So why it matters: deep sea inhabitants are unique, slow to recover and maybe irreversible damage. There are certain species which if they get endangered, to revive them it is very, to recover those species is very difficult. Why? We do not yet understand the long term impacts. Even if I'm doing the mining in year 2026, maybe the impacts, adverse impacts will be there after 2 years, 3 years, also after the stoppage of the particular activity. Protecting the ocean today safeguards its future for the coming generations. So preventive action, take action to prevent potential harm even in the face of scientific uncertainty. Burden of proof: the proponent of the deep sea mining must demonstrate that it is safe. If there is certain company who is doing that mining, they should clearly explain to the nearby people as well as to the policy makers that we are doing this activity. These are the pros, these are the cons. Okay, alternatives. And without minimum invasive technique, if we are able to do that mining, we have to always go for such kind of techniques, like explore and choose alternatives that provide the best outcome with the least harm. And public involvement, ensure public participation and transparency in the case of decision making. This is very important. Why? Because if you see Minamata the disease in Japan also, lot of chemical waste was released by this Chizo factory into the nearby that Minamata Bay. Even after the stoppage of the release from that particular industry, still generations of people were impacted because the entire Minamata Bay was contaminated. Similarly, in the case of Bihar also, if you see uranium mining was there. Even the mining activity today, if it is stopped, means the activity, the result of those activity will be impacted for the generations. Even if you see Bhopal gas tragedy, it occurred 40, 30, 40 years before. But today also the coming the generations are still impacted by that particular tragedy. Even if you see Chernobyl disaster, or if you see historically, if you can look into all those accidents, you can understand why it is very important. Communicating a decision making to the people is very, very important, because those are the people who are staying in that particular environment or community. Okay, so in continuation only, we are discussing textbook only. The issue of when and how to use precautionary principle both within the European Union and internationally is given rise to much debate and to mixed and sometimes contradictory views. Because I told you, no, there are three, four set of groups are there. Each group is coming with different decisions. So all have to come to a single common conclusion. Then only a policy or act can be made. So thus decision makers are constantly faced with dilemma of balancing between freedom and rights of the individuals, industry, because you have to make economically, you have to make profit if that country want to earn more money. And organizations also, social organizations also, you have to keep it in mind. Common people also, you have to keep it in mind, with the need to reduce the risk of adverse effects to the environment, human, animal and plant health. Simple example I'll tell you: use of pesticides is there. Pesticides are very important in order to feed the increasing population, but residue of pesticides eventually might cause some toxicity. So chemistry industry also, they need to prove that use of pesticides is safe. Similarly, in higher concentration, the residue should not be there to the final consumer. Soil should not be get affected in the production of these pesticides. If it is polluting the nearby river bodies or air, that also keep it. So, so many things will be involved when you're taking this particular type of decisions. Okay. So, coming back to, therefore, finding the correct balance, and so that the proportionate, non-discriminatory Transparent, coherent actions can be taken, require a structured decision-making process with a detailed scientific and other objective information. So pause the video, understand it's very challenging for the policymakers to sit at a table to come to a final conclusion. Okay, so precautionary principle versus burden of proof. Core idea is action is taken when there is sufficient scientific proof of harm. Action is taken in the face of uncertainty, that is burden of proof. Okay, who must prove? Precautionary principle, those who want to take action, that is regulatory and public. Approach uncertainty is equal to action. Focus evidence-based proof of harm. Example application, allow a chemical product until it is proven to be causal or motto. Don't act until we know it is harmful and act now to prevent even if we are not 100% sure. Okay, so this is how it is. We will go out when you prove we will be boiled alive. Other party precautionary principle is that we should get out we now only until you can prove we won't be boiled alive. Okay, pause the video and see this example. So I have taken one question from the chat GPT. Since I didn't get questions from the ABT decertification concept, we'll see how the precautionary principle is applicable because most of this we coming across precautionary principle with respect to environment. Okay, social applications are there. How it is important with respect to toxicology and chemical, we'll see. So what is the main idea of precautionary principle in environment and health policy? The right answer will be in the green text. The lack of full scientific uncertainty should not stop. Even though we don't have final results, it should not stop us from taking action to prevent serious harm. Actions to prevent the environment should wait until there is a complete scientific proof of danger. We are not waiting for the final result. Companies can use any new chemical or technology until it causes a proven disaster. No, we are not waiting till the disaster happens. Government rules are only needed after an environmental accident happens. No. Similarly, like that of Bhopal crash tragedy or CO disaster or Minimata Bay disease, no. Same historically, we should not repeat the same mistakes. Okay. Hope from this video you were able to understand about precautionary principle. At least from the two videos we try to discuss the from the two textbooks we have tried to discuss the concepts and two questions are also I have given so that at the end of the video what you have learned, what you can remember. I think in the example they will give you only statements only they will give you how the application will be there. Thank you so much. Be curious. All the best for your exam.